All right, folks. So Kim is right. Andy is going to talk about solutions. I know we've been talking a lot about what's wrong tonight, but we are going to get to that. First, though, I was supposed to come up here and introduce Patrick Hana. He's a board member of Reach Advocacy, and his presentation is about the cost of homelessness. We're going to get into some hard numbers. Now, unfortunately, a pressing personal event for Patrick has prevented him from being with us tonight. So I'm going to talk about some numbers. That's not so much my wheelhouse, but I promise this is all, if it's doable for me, it's doable for you, I guess is what I'm trying to say there. So we're breaking this down into two parts. We have short-term community services, and we'll get into what that means, but that's, the fire department responding to somebody who's in crisis, for example. And then we have community financial impacts, and that's how the housing crisis impacts businesses, impacts neighborhoods, property values, sort of the ripples that come out after we're talking about, short-term services. And so if you do some research on this topic, you get numbers that range from $35,000 to $100,000 per person per year. And we're just talking now about community services, right? We're not even getting into broader impacts in the community. That's hospitals, police response, detox programs, sweeps, jail, court. All of these things end up averaging out to somewhere in the $35,000 to $100,000 per year range. And there's no long-term solution there, right? You go into the hospital, you rack up these bills that you're probably not going to ever pay back, you're dumped back out onto the streets, and we're just waiting for the next crisis. As Patrick points out here, the only off-ramp that a lot of folks experience from this cycle is death. And then the county is going to pay for the cremation and the burial. Now, the numbers on here, it's written out, and I'm going to emphasize it again. These are understated. 181 chronically homeless is lower than the actual real number, but we're going to stick with these for the projections that Patrick put together. But please keep that in the back of your mind as we move through this, that all these numbers are lower than what we're actually dealing with. The 1056 number for total is also just too low. 67.5, that is actually the accurate number between 35,000 and 100,000. And so when you take these numbers and you multiply them out for 2024, the annual cost for the county to support our unhoused population comes out to $12.2 million minimum, again, understated. Now we're going to take that number, we're going to look at the next couple years. And as Dr. Duda Benoit pointed out to us, over the last year, the population of chronically unhoused folks doubled, right? We went from 88 to 181. People are becoming unhoused faster. That's been something that Kim was just talking about, right? 700 requests in 3 days. That wasn't how it was 5 years ago. And we have people staying unhoused longer. There's not enough places to put people. So if we assume that nothing changes, if nothing comes of this presentation and our efforts, if we assume that that number next year only jumps by 50%, not that it doubles, just that it goes up by 50%, and that we take inflation to be at 2.5%, which is the most recent estimate from the federal government, these are the estimates that we get. For 2024, like we already saw, 12.2 million. 2025, we'll be up to almost 300 chronically unhoused folks. And again, that's 50% increase. That's not doubled like we saw the last year. 18.8 million, almost 30 million. 2027, which is coming up way faster than anyone in this room wants to admit, right? That's $44.4 million. All of them, again, vastly understated. Now we'll turn from these immediate costs, because again, there we're talking about fire services, we're talking about costs to the hospital, we're talking about what the county is going to pay. Now we'll look at some of those ripple effects, right? If we're talking about business revenue, a lot of small businesses in neighborhoods with larger unhoused populations are faced with additional costs, right, that result from the crisis. They have higher insurance rates. They're often paying somebody to maybe sit at the front and keep an eye on things. Like if you go into the Walgreens down at the corner of Monroe and Goodman, they have a security guard. If you drive down Monroe into Pittsford and you go into the Walgreens, that branch isn't paying for a security guard. And then, of course, you can lose revenue just from people having safety concerns. You hear folks say, especially if you're out in the suburbs, they don't want to go into the city. They have this image of it being such a dangerous place. I think a lot of us in this room know that it's really not, but at the end of the day, that's impacting businesses in our community. Neighborhood impacts exist as well. You have folks that are unwilling to buy homes in certain areas. These issues lead to higher insurance costs, lowered property values. These costs are difficult to estimate, but I think we can all imagine that they're very real. Oh, and I jumped ahead. Real estate valuation impacts. Not my presentation, folks. Now, Patrick has in the bottom here, and I wish it was in larger type, homelessness is solvable. If you take a look at all this money that we've listed out here, what if you spent that doing things that, actually pulled people out of this cycle, right? If you had permanent supportive housing options for folks who need it, if you had more programs like Family Promise that can help with the 700 requests that they got in 3 days, you can break the cycle. You're not going to pay all that money anymore. You have to go upstream, like Kim said, and see why people are falling into the river instead of just pulling them out. All right, well, that's Patrick's presentation.